As world leaders gather in Dubai to discuss global efforts to combat climate change, there's one company here in the U.S. It's incorporating artificial intelligence to try to help solve the problem.
Yeah, it's called ClimateAi. It's a company that has created a platform called ClimateAi's. It combines science and artificial intelligence to help businesses put their best eco-friendly foot forward.
Here now to explain more about the platform is Dave Farnham, the lead innovation scientist of ClimateAi. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, so explain how this whole thing works. How does your company's artificial intelligence platform help businesses to become better?
Absolutely. Pleasure to be on with you both this morning. So fundamentally, artificial intelligence really is pattern recognition, right? And so a lot of folks are familiar with ChatGPT or chatbots in general, which recognize a pattern in the way that language and writing is expressed, and can answer queries like write me a Taylor Swift song in the voice of William Shakespeare, for example. In our case, in the weather and climate case, it's a similar idea where we're training a machine to learn patterns of the atmosphere, the oceans, the land surfaces, and responding to the query of what is the next day or week or decade going to look like, given that the past week, month, year has manifested as it has. So it's really just the idea of recognizing patterns in the way that the climate and weather system operate. So yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. But
so a question for you, Sarah. So how do you take that information, or how does a business take what you're telling them about the climate now or the climate in the future and change what they're doing or alter what they're doing so they can still get their products into our homes if you live in Idaho or wherever you might live? How does that impact that chain?
Absolutely. Excellent question. And I will say one of the challenges that comes with using AI for really anything, but especially let's take the agricultural sector, for example, is to distill down the insights that come out of our modeling. So I'll give you a few examples. One could be a company that needs a certain amount of corn every year. And so they're trying to predict how much corn is going to be available come the end of harvest time. And that, of course, is very dependent on weather. And so in that case, we're using our weather and climate forecasts to actually estimate yields. And they can plan better, or perhaps in some cases, if it looks like there's a warning sign of poor yields coming up in their main areas that they source from, they can basically take action to try to procure the corn from a different region.
So
another example.
Yeah, I have a question for you. So you specifically said like the weather, so that means the rain or whatever. But for example, let's stick with corn. The mighty Mississippi River dealing with climate. We've seen the drastic drops in the river levels so that they can't get the corn down the system, down the river and out to market. Is that something also that plays into this as well?
Absolutely. So we're developing river level forecasts, which fundamentally depend on how much precipitation has been available for that season. Absolutely. I'll just give you one quick other anecdote is for demand planning for, say, a construction materials company, looking at upcoming hurricane season and trying to understand how hard should we run the factories, how much material should we produce, given whether it's going to be a big hurricane year with a lot of risk of high intensity landfall events, or a more modest one.
So this seems to be helpful for businesses, companies, as far as adapting and planning. How does it necessarily help with climate change?
Great question. I'll premise first by saying I do think, regardless of how much we can mitigate climate change, extreme weather is going to be a part of living on planet Earth. So I do think that the adaptation has sort of always been necessary and will always be necessary. I'll give you an example of how this type of technology can contribute to the mitigation efforts, though, and that's on the optimal placement of renewable energy sources. So specifically, wind and solar generation and hydropower are inherently very dependent on weather and climate. And so understanding as we transition our energy system where those should be placed in order to sort of stabilize the grid, because one of the, not to go too much into it, but one of the sort of challenges of a renewable energy transition is to have stable power whenever we need it.
So Dave, I know we've been talking about a lot about food, we've been talking about power, but this really also impacts everything from like clothes. Companies that buy and make clothes and then get them, they got to have the product. So all of this is, for people watching at home, and they're like, how does this impact me? It impacts pretty much everything they're going to buy in the future.
Yeah, I mean, almost every supply chain, if you're moving things around the globe at all, is going to be exposed to extreme weather and climate. And to the extent to which companies can understand whether there are risks manifesting in the coming season, they can take action to maybe accelerate a shipment or delay a shipment, or look to ship things from other parts of the globe. So yeah, absolutely. I think any modern day supply chain is really inherently exposed to weather and climate extremes. And that's sort of why we think that our platform, while initially a lot of our customers are in the agricultural sector, which of course is very exposed to weather and climate, our platform is helpful to any really supply chain.
All right.
Dave Farnham, Lead Innovation Scientist of ClimateAi, thanks so much. We'll be right back.
Thank you very much.